pumpkin faces in the night, candy apples and razor blades, butcher knives and babysitters. Tonight is the night that he comes home. The boogeyman is coming. What's going on, everyone? Thank you for joining us over here at Review Zero once again, the only place on the internet that gives you the feeling of stalking through the aisles of your local video store and reading the back of the VHS box. I will be your host for today's video. My name is Race, and today we're going to be covering John Carpenter's 1978 slasher, Halloween. Before we get into slashing up jack-o'-lanterns and babysitters alike, I'd like to thank every single one of you that's come back, liked, commented, and subscribed to us over here at Review Zero. I thank you from the bottom of our shriveled black little hearts. So, enough of the mushy, let's go ahead and throw some razor blades into some peanut butter cups and get this going, shall we? As with everything around here at Review Zero, we are going to be giving credit where credit is due, as in the actual credits themselves. This 1978 spooky slasher spectacular, interesting alliteration, good stuff. Written, directed, scored by, produced by, John Carpenter had his grubby little fingers over everything. And of course, as always, with his partner in crime, Deborah Hill, they really made this low-budget indie flick into a really, really big blockbuster, type of event for the time. Again, everything from conception to writing. He had his sticky little fingers over everything, including the score and, of course, the titular and iconic theme song. Not only did it have a great cast, including Jamie Lee Curtis, Donald Pleasance, PJ Soles, and of course Nick Castle as the Shape, but there was a smattering of different young talent and up-and-coming talent that we saw on screen that have had different reiterations in some of the newer versions of them, including the Rob Zombie versions, the direct sequels, including a couple nods in number 3, which was Season of the Witch, as well as the reboot trilogy sequels, whatnot, Halloween, Halloween Kills, and Halloween Ends. Now, everybody that has seen this movie, or that has at least been alive for the last 40 some odd years, understands and knows the basic breakdown and all the characters including in it, and some of the bigger names that have come out of it, such as Jamie Lee Curtis, of course. But through that cast, we had Donald Pleasance, Jamie Lee Curtis, we had Nancy Kyes playing Annie, PJ Soles as Linda, Charles Cyphers as Brackett, Kylie Richards as Lindsay, and Brian Andrews as Tommy, including the always venerable Nick Castle as the Shape himself. But as always, all the information as far as credits is going to be right here. So you can go ahead and read everything, pause for yourself, and check it all out, and go ahead and give a slight nod of the knife or a tug of the mask to all the people that made this possible, including some of the production staff and producers themselves, such as Mustafa Akkad, John Carpenter again, and Deborah Hill, Cool Lusby, and Erwin Yablis, actually. So that's kind of where we're at right now. This 1978 horror classic is considered by many to be one of the greatest horror films of all time. Not only is this John Carpenter directing, but him writing and putting everything into it, as he's always done with every single one of his films, really makes it feel special. It makes it feel homegrown and small and very, very, very intimate. The breakdown, as everybody knows, is the story of the masked killer, Michael Myers, who escapes the mental hospital on Halloween night and terrorizes the small town of Haddonfield. One of the real striking aspects of the film is the suspense and the real creepy atmosphere that Carpenter really masterfully blends. He builds tension through the movie, creating a sense of dread that really has the audiences, on the edge of their seats and just grasping and biting at those fingernails. The film's iconic, overture, the actual score itself, that builds through the atmosphere and really making it one of those unforgettable movie-going experiences, was helmed by Carpenter himself. He played every single note on there and really just had his ear in it. He had his head in it, and it really became this striking experience, not only visually but sonically and atmospheric. It was just incredible stuff. Not only do we get atmosphere and creep and that sense of dread and just absolute tension with almost every single scene that's coming through here with the sonic direction and the cinematography, but the acting itself. Not only does Donald Pleasance as Dr. Loomis, the psychiatrist that's tasked with taking Michael Myers back or putting the boogeyman down. I mean, like Dr. Loomis said, these are the devil's eyes. So, not great. Kids be crazy. This is also the first time that we get to see Jamie Lee Curtis as Laurie Strode, the main protagonist of the series, overall, with her revisiting the role in 1978 as the titular character, but the sequel as well, Halloween 2, and then the sequel trilogy, as well as 2 other films, H2O and Resurrection. So she keeps coming back to this, and she just keeps knocking it out of the park every time. But this is the first time that we get to see her do it and defeat the Shape. Despite being filmed on a relatively low budget, Halloween is a very visually stunning film. I mean, the cinematography is excellent, and the film's use of light and shadow only adds to the creepy atmosphere and the real claustrophobic nature of the main antagonist, Michael Myers, hiding in those small places, closets, behind doors. I mean, just everything. This Shape is literally creeping around every corner. I mean, it's incredibly easy to see why this movie became one of the most must-see films of all of horror. I mean, and the genre and the series continues on with reboot after reboot and sequel after sequel. I mean, everybody understands universally the creep factor of Michael Myers himself. Something that really sets Halloween apart from almost every other slasher or every other character within the genre is really the gripping sense of urgency and tension. I mean, this is really what makes this film a cornerstone and a staple of anybody's horror treasure trove. Getting to the nit and grit of everything, of how it moved, Halloween is the story of Michael Myers and Laurie Strode. Always has, always will be. Halloween starts out simple enough. We see that it's Halloween night and there's somebody in a house creeping around. This is shot through a point of view, so a POV of the stalker, of the killer, and we see this POV moving through the house and up the stairs and into this bedroom where there is this teenage girl and she's getting ready for bed, and we turn to see her catch eyes with the creeping figure. She says Michael, and then all of a sudden you see the butcher knife come in to frame and start going to town and going to work. After the scream and the general pandemonium of what we just saw, we then see that there are the parents that are pulling into this home, into the driveway, and they keep repeating the same name, Michael, and the POV disappears and it shows a small boy in a clown costume with the mask being ripped away, and it zooms out, perpetrated by a kid. Ugh. This is why you buy name brand candy, folks. Make sure, because the tricks at Halloween get a little extreme sometimes. So leave out the treats. After we pull away, we go ahead and see that we have fast forwarded 15 years into the future. It is now October 30th in Haddonfield, and we're met on a stormy night with a nurse in a station wagon pulling up to the sanitarium, where we can only assume that they've been keeping Michael. But something is wrong. The gates are open, and the patients are out walking the grounds. We see a figure scurry up and onto the roof of the car, and then smash through the window, taking the nurse out and speeding away into the night, where a frantic Dr. Loomis comes in, shakes the nurse, asks for information, met with only screams and confusion. He now knows the devil has gone home, and the evil is on the loose. We're then given a little bit of a slice of life from this young girl named Laurie. And Laurie and the rest of her friends are planning their Halloween evening. They're planning on hanging out or going to a party or getting the friends together, when all of a sudden Miss Downer herself, Laurie, says, I can't. I gotta watch my neighbor from across the street. With all the young teenage debauchery fully snuffed out, or at least we think, the movie continues on with Laurie feeling this sense of unease as we get other shots of this point of view from the Shape, from Michael, following. Because it turns out that there is a connection between what happened all those years ago and tonight. Ooh, but you'll have to watch out. After some nonsense and this and that, the movie really starts getting rolling on how it's going to be dispatching and taking care of the rest of the characters. We are seeing that Michael is methodical. He is very much in his element, sneaking and skulking around these places, setting up booby traps and really watching his prey. He's not operating as a real serial killer as much as he's operating as a force of nature. I mean, he's really operating as if he's an animal stalking prey. It's really interesting the way that Carpenter approached this, because this isn't just some deranged madman doing this. This is something instinctual. This is something natural that lives inside of this being. That's why if you actually watch the film, you'll see that there's 3 different actors that all are given credits for playing Michael Myers. 2 of them are actually credited as young Michael Myers, 6 years old, and then Michael Myers, 21 years old. And then it simply just says The Shape, and that of course is Nick Castle. And pretty apt for the name, because through the majority of the film we just see Michael stalking around every corner, and we're seeing things from the periphery of our own view, which is a very interesting approach, and there hadn't been too many things that had been done like that before in this specific genre. Now, as the film progresses and the sun goes down, there is where we start getting some of our kills, and considering that it is really the birth of what most would consider modern slashers, there isn't a whole lot of gore. It's more of surprise elements, and then the way that these young folks are dispatched, it's not particularly shocking by today's standards, but the way that it's done with such precision is more than unnerving. And especially a few different points, like when Bob is taken out and Michael stabs him onto the wall, and he has this curious look where he just tilts the head. It's this curious thing that if you end up watching the rest of the series, you'll find that this is his way of decorating. He actually leaves his body count in specific places where they're seen, typically towards the crescendo of the film, to where you see he's decorating his haunted house. After a few more tense scenes and a few more dispatchments, we are now left in the final girl moment. We are now left with Laurie's moment, and she is doing everything that she can to not only protect herself, but also the 2 children that she's been left in charge with. And throughout this is really where the stakes are built up. And yes, of course, we've lost some cast members, we've lost some friends along the way, but this is now the true fight for survival. We see some great shots, some awesome jump scares, and of course the famous closet scene of Laurie hiding in there and just holding on to dear life, and then boom, it erupts with Michael coming in. And whew, stuff and nightmares. I mean, we're talking about using the closet as a way to hide from the boogeyman. Whew, some good stuff. And of course, it's at this point to where we see Dr. Loomis come in, save the day, put 5 rounds into him, or possibly 6, we're not really sure because it varies from cut to cut. However, what we do know is one of the final shots of the scene is we get to see top down from the veranda onto the grounds of the backyard, and we see the body of Michael Myers sitting there immobilized, supposedly dead, and Laurie turning to Dr. Loomis and crying and asking, "Was that the boogeyman?" In which he replies, "Yes." And then turn to inspect the spot again. Body is gone. Enter the iconic theme song, and we're rolling credits. Despite being this iconic film, nobody really thought it was going to go there. This was an indie flick, and considering that John Carpenter wasn't the name that he is now and didn't have carte blanche to do whatever he'd like, this had a very small budget of only about $325,000, okay? $325,000. It was only shot in 3 weeks, okay, 21 days. It was nothing for something like this. And considering that it went on to smash the box office at well over $70 million, this was what cemented Carpenter as being able to kind of do whatever he wanted moving further with the studios, and especially with Deborah Hill working alongside of him all those years. He was able to greenlight some incredible stuff, as you well know, such as Escape from New York, The Thing. The list goes on, but you'll know if you know. As every good horror buff knows, we all know the iconic Michael Myers mask, and that was a Captain Kirk mask at the time, taken out, filled over a little bit with some white paint, tousling the hair, getting rid of the eyebrows, and boom, we have the iconic mask. And there's something so unnerving about a human visage, but it being completely ghost white and devoid of any real distinct features. I mean, just this generic face moving out of the shadows. To me, I always thought of it as watching a nature documentary of a great white shark appearing out of the depths. I mean, it's just there. It's horrifying. But I digress. The excellent music that goes into this film that most of us take for granted and kind of forget, other than the theme song at times. It was only recorded in 3 hours. I mean, John Carpenter sat down with a little keyboard and did exactly what he did best. Put his idea directly through his hands. Despite what you may know about Illinois, Haddonfield and its beautiful palm trees, Haddonfield is not a real place. The film was actually shot in Pasadena in Southern California. So that's why in those big shots and those long shots of the streets and the neighborhoods, you are seeing palm trees and you are seeing some very, very Southwest and West Coast style homes, including, the main facade of the Halloween home, which nothing was shot on location. The houses were actually shot on sound stages. At only 21 years old, this was Jamie Lee Curtis's first feature film. Now, due to the success of the film, this skyrocketed her into an incredible career that she's held for well over 45 years. I mean, she's done everything from horror to comedy to drama to just kind of everything else in between. I personally loved her in True Lies, Trading Places, and then stuff as goofy and as recent as Scream Queens. Really funny stuff. I mean, there's nothing that chick can't do. Plus, absolute smoke show. Now, like I had mentioned previously, this film, this small little indie budget thing that was done for next to nothing, I mean, $325,000 may seem like a lot of money for anything, but for a production like this, back at the time that was still kind of studio helmed, not really. Then you consider the return of over $70 million. This is what officially, on book anyways, makes it the most successful indie film of all time. I mean, come on. Look at the sequels and remakes and franchise and series and careers that it helped launch. It is undeniable that it was a stroke of genius. Both marketing, editing, everything that went into it. I mean, production was just nuts. And the way that it was edited, specifically to make it feel like Michael was one step ahead, that was something that we had not seen. We're used to some pretty, I would say, bumbling horror archetypes up until this point. Without almost any dialogue in the entirety of the series, Michael is more captivating than anything that Freddy Krueger has ever said, except for maybe Welcome to Prime Time. And with all that in mind, it's really no surprise why this true labor of love turned out for everybody involved, from the actors, to the production staff, to the studios, to the executives, and everyone else. It was a major hit. I mean, this obliterated every expectation there could be and launched many different careers, revived a few of them, and really turned the smaller version of the slasher horror genre into a juggernaut that dominated through the 80s as well as the 90s. And without Halloween, we really wouldn't have some of the awesome flicks that we take for granted, such as Nightmare on Elm Street, or Friday the 13th, or Child's Play, or, I mean, really anything. I mean, heck, if it weren't for Texas Chainsaw Massacre, none of this would have come about. But even that, between Leatherface and Michael Myers, we wouldn't have Jasons or Freddys or Chuckies. Heck, we have no Evil Deads either, so it was truly miraculous that something this small and not really all that ambitious turned into a legacy film. And it's time for us to blow the candles out in the jack-o'-lantern, grab the bowl of candy and bring it back inside, and lock the door. We have to check behind the curtains, and under the beds, and in the closets, making sure that no sinister shapes are waiting for us in the dark. My name is Race. Thank you for joining us again at Review Zero. We'll catch you next time. Oh, and I forgot.